Welcome back, everybody. We're really excited tonight to conclude the entire Likutei Amarim. After myriads of classes on this Likutei Amarim for quite some years, those of us who joined throughout and those who picked up in the middle, it was definitely room for excitement. Now, the excitement is naturally not personal because there's a predicate in Torah itself for celebrating a siyum. For that matter, a siyum is categorized in halacha as a sudas mitzvah. In other words, the suda, the meal associated with a siyum, is classified in halacha as a siyum, as a sudas mitzvah. For that matter, not everything associated with a mitzvah is considered a sudas mitzvah categorically. For example, a bar mitzvah, despite the grandness of this celebration, for that matter, it says in Zayar that a bar mitzvah is like a wedding day. It's like one's wedding. And interesting expressions in that very Zayar, which tells us of the grandness of a suda, of a bar mitzvah. But nonetheless, in halach, it's not a sudas mitzvah. For example, in the 9 days, just a quick example, where of the past, naturally, Mashiach is coming now. So the past, the 9 days when one wants to eat meat, in halacha, so you're not allowed eating meat in the 9 days, but if you make a siyum, if you establish or you eat at a sudas mitzvah, so then you're allowed to eat meat. What constitutes a sudas mitzvah? For example, a siyum. A bris, the suda of a bris is a sudas mitzvah, as an example. But a siyum also, it's based on a Gemara. They made a famous, the famous sage, which is brought in the Gemara, a suda the Gemara shel Torah, and it was a very big celebration. And again, as it evolves from that Gemara, that in the end of the day, this is formally a sudas mitzvah. So this is really a reason not only of a personal excitement to finish the Tanya. I say the Tanya, even though the Tanya has five segments, and for that matter, Bez Hashem, this coming segment, Haba Aleinu L'Teva V'Livracha, we are going to begin the next segment called Shar Yichud V'Emunah, a very unique teaching on its own merit. Understandably, Bez Hashem, we'll talk about it when we get there. But generally, when we say Tanya, it's usually referred to Likutei Amarim. This is the magnum opus of the Alter Rebbe, the entire Tanya, but particularly Likutei Amarim. The Alter Rebbe revolutionized his derech and his guide, and ultimately, like we said, we noted the other day, the best way you can say that, perfect manual. You buy a machine, and there's a manual which is mediocre. It helps you get through it, but as you use it, you can use it for a year or two, and you realize you're missing out on a lot of the good stuff, and you did certain things which did not prevent the bad stuff to occur in the usage of this machine. So it's a manual. It's letting you get by, but there's the perfect manual, which you get the best out of it, best production, and best preventions of anything which can go wrong. And so too, the Alter Rebbe in Likutei Amarim, like I said, this is really a great way of classifying Likutei Amarim, the perfect manual for the Yid of the Neshama Alei Adam, Neshama coming down in the Guf Gashmi, in Elam Hazeh Gashmi, and to navigate this journey, this odyssey of Elam Hazeh. It's complicated, as we all know it, materially, spiritually, and we have namely not only to prevent ourselves which the challenges which come our way, but namely to understand our objective, what we're here for, what is generally the objective of life, and particularly the life of the Yid, and so on and so forth. You have over here, this manual, this perfect manual, which brings the Yid, takes the Yid by the hand, and walks him through pretty much through every stage of life, every state and every stage of life, and shows him the right direction, what to do and what not to do, and so on and so forth. So generally, Likutei Amarim remains the magnum opus of the Alter Rebbe. In specific, again, the whole Tanya, but particularly Likutei Amarim. Generally, when we say Tanya, it's generally referring, again, in general, when you say in context of things, definitely Likutei Amorim is, when you say Tanya, is Likutei Amorim. So when we conclude, we have the opportunity to conclude Likutei Amorim, not only some personal excitement, it is mandated, is again, there's a predicate for it in Torah, that this is a siyum for a Gemara shel Torah, conclusion of Torah, and in this case, we spoke about it also, Likutei Amorim, the 53 chapters corresponding to the Torah Shebiksav, as it was always notated by Chassidim, that Likutei Amorim being the Torah Shebiksav, of the Torah Chassidus of the Alter Rebbe, the first Chabad Rebbe, and so on. So definitely, it's something definitely worthwhile to note, and we look forward, B'ez Hashem, today to conclude the Likutei Amorim. So we're holding on 148. The bottom 148, the last line is Zeu Shamar Yenuka. So it's literally the last line of 148. You can see it in the corresponding English text, and to note as well that to pick up on the previous classes, even of this chapter and all the previous classes, it comes up in different sites, but namely the original site is the tanyaonline.com, following it on the original site, or clicking on that site, even where it's presented on other sites, is the advantage that you're able to follow the text simultaneous to the class. It's set up with a separate scroll bar, also very easy access to all the previous classes, and for that matter, from the very beginning of Tanya, and it comes up in the same fashion. So Tanya Online, oneword.com. And even, we always struggle how to begin a shir. Do we really take the time to recap the previous class in order to enter the shir? But we always contemplate how much time to invest. So really, it's not justified, because this is the time given for this class, and the other class is a click away. Like we mentioned the other day, you don't even need to spend those 30 seconds rewinding in the good old tape recorders. For those of you who know what they look like. In any case, it's really a click away. So I think today we'll take a start. The message is very clear and very conspicuous in the last class. This was stood out. It was bailit over here. The message of the Alter Rebbe, how the Torah mitzvahs today is the conduit through which the Shechina comes into Elam Ha'asiyah. Again, to understand these words, you really got to go to this past class and previous class on this very chapter. As the Alter Rebbe begins in the 51st chapter, a new idea explaining the Yenuka, which he brought in Lamed Hey with this revolutionary message. I use that term because it's something which the Alter Rebbe himself asks before he brings the Yenuka. What's the point of the Beinoni struggling in Elam Hazeh? He never gets to the point of the Tzaddik, so he's always struggling with the Yetzer Hara, and Alter Rebbe says apparently it's Lahebav Larik. It seems to invade the neshama to come down, especially the majority of the Yidden, their mandate is to be the Beinoni. What's the point? So he brings the Yenuka, and he brings the message of the Yenuka, and explains that famous Yenuka. And again, it was a child in the time of the Zar. Look already, I'm wasting time of repeating, which we mentioned a few times, even in these three chapters, but namely in the very beginning of Nun Aleph, we pointed out this Yenuka, who was a child which had a vast flow of knowledge, again, disproportionate to his age. In any case, so the Alter Rebbe brings that Yenuka and explains a very important piece of information, or introduces a very important piece of information to explain why the neshama in the end of the day did come down, and why is it worth it for the Beinoni to live from a Yid Alei Adames, despite that he never overcomes finally his struggles. Hashem could upgrade him to a tzaddik, but if he didn't, so he knows that he has to be the Beinoni all along, and he's always struggling. So what's the deal? Why is it so important that he should go through the struggle, never get to the end line? And this Alter Rebbe introduces this Yenuka, and the very beginning of their Lamed Hey, but in the beginning of Nun Aleph, he says l'toisves be an additional explanation of this very Yenuka. And he extracts these words of the Yenuka, and it puts emphasis on this Hashras Hashchina, the idea of the dwelling of the divine presence. And he asks the question, apparently, there's no place which is devoid of it, because what does it mean, the dwelling of Hashem's presence? And then he goes on. Again, you've got to see all those classes. Mainly, Alter Rebbe begins Nun Aleph. It's these three chapters are definitely an idea conveyed on its own. In other words, the Nun Aleph, Nun Beis, and Gimel is a one idea, beginning in Nun Aleph and culminating in Nun Gimel, which this becomes the total, finally, the final conclusion of the entire Tanya, which we explained again. We could appreciate why this would be the final concluding words of the Tanya, concluding message of the Tanya. So he brings the mashal, the example of the nefesh entering into the system of the person. It has to have that interface, which is the brain, the nerve system, which it enters. Again, you have to see it there. The Alter Rebbe takes a whole full page to elaborate on the mashal itself, which he found it very crucial and very essential to do so in order for us to understand adequately the nimshal. So you need the nerve system, the brain, the chacham bin das, in order to enter into the system of the human body. And that is, again, we know it, there's the nerve system, the brain, which Alter Rebbe called it's the chacham bin das, and he says in every single olam, in order to the energy should function in that olam, it has to go through the chacham bin das of that olam. And then he goes, when we had the Beis Hamikdash, the Orein was that entryway of Elokus to come into Olam Hazeh through the Orein, which we had the Torah there, that was called the Kodesh, which was in the Kodesh HaKadoshim. For that matter, he calls every level of Chacham bin Das of every world, it's the Kodesh HaKadoshim of that world. And then he says there's a physical Kodesh HaKadoshim, the way HaKadosh Baruch Hu enters into Olam Hazeh. Then he says the difference between the first Bayis Rishon and the first Beis Hamikdash and the second Beis Hamikdash. And then he says when the Beis Hamikdash was unfortunately destroyed, we have Ein Leila Kodesh Baruch Hu. The Chazal tell us, our sages of blessed memories tell us, Hashem doesn't have only the 4 cubits of halacha. Ein Leila Kodesh Baruch Hu L'dal Da'amas Shel Halacha, which as the Alter Rebbe points out, that is the conduit in the end of the day to which Hashem enters into Olam Asiyah through the 4 cubits of halachas. And again, you see the end of the last class how he explains it so beautifully, how this Torah, generally, Torah, mitzvahs, this is the Kodesh HaKadoshim. This is the entryway of Hashem into coming to Olam Hazeh. Similarly, the way he came through the Oren or the Chacham bin Das of every single Olam. Again, you have to see it in the previous classes to understand the build-up, and then where the Alter Rebbe gets to Til B'Zeh Shabbat Yinuka. So in the end of the day, the Torah mitzvahs is the way you have the Hashras, the Shechina comes through the Torah mitzvahs, the performance of Torah mitzvahs, namely Mishachara Beis Hamikdash, when the Beis Hamikdash, from the time the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed. We don't have the physical Aron, unfortunately, just for a short time now, Be'ezus Hashem. And then he said that, as Alter Rebbe again explains, it's dafka the Torah mitzvahs, the way the mitzvahs are performed, the ma'isa in action associated with Olam Asiyah. Again, you got to see it in the previous classes. It's a click away. We will begin V'zeu Shamar Yunuka, and this is what the Yunuka noted. The Nehira Ilo the Adlik al Reisha, that the supreme light, which is ignited on the head, literally on the head of the Yid, he Shechinta. What is the supreme light? This is the Shechina. This is the divine presence. Itzrich lemoshcha. You need to oil it. So again, there was the way the Alter Rebbe explained it there in Lamed Hey, but here he says Pirush, least in the context of this message from Perek Nun Aleph. With that, again, articulate example, you got to understand this whole thing, which we just summed it up in 7 minutes. You got to see the message in order to appreciate it adequately. In Nun Aleph, Nun Beis, Nun Gimel, at least till here, and then to understand the culmination of this chapter, which becomes a culmination of Tanya. In this case, you're dealing with the Shechina coming through to the actual Olam. In this case, Olam HaAsiyah, in this physical Olam, or even Olam HaAsiyah Ruchnis, but namely over here, it's this Olam HaAsiyah. In order to come through, it needs the performance of Torah mitzvahs. And in this case, microcosmically, in order that the Lukus should be Sheira, in other words, that becomes the Kodesh HaKadoshim in the macro picture. But in the micro, it refers to every single Yid. In order that the Lukus should manifest in his system, it has to be based on the oil, on the Shemen Mishchas Kodesh. It needs to be based on Torah mitzvahs, again, based on this whole explanation, we could say it easily. It could be easily said. We need Torah mitzvahs that the Shekhinah should come down to us, but we got to follow the pattern to understand this important message. That based on what we said over here, that the nefesh never comes into the system of the body without the nerve system, without the brain. As Dal Rebbe speaks about and again elaborates a full page in the metaphor. And it's very important to study not only the message, but to study the metaphor of the Alter Rebbe. How the nefesh on its own is abstract, has nothing of the system of the body, doesn't have even in the most subtle manner the idea of, for example, audio, vision, nothing like that exists in the nefesh, even as a kayach, even as an energy which will ultimately establish the phenomenon of vision by this human being, or audio by this human being. There's nothing of it. It's completely abstract. It's completely abstract from being involved in the guf and the specific kaychas, specific faculties of the body. Completely abstract, completely removed. And so too, that's why the Alter Rebbe compares it to the Ein Sof. The Ein Sof and Olam is, you can't think of anything more distant or separated, or the dissonance between us, Ein Sof and the Olam. There's no connection at all. And that's why, again, it's important to understand the metaphor. The Rebbe, again, uncharacteristically takes an entire page and explains just a mashal. And again, because he wants us to understand the nimshal very clearly. In this case, when you follow that mashal and you understand, you focus on the yid, it says that the Shekhinah does not come down, it doesn't work, so to say, within the human being, within the yid, to fulfill his objective and goal, to transform his nefesh mahamis, his animal soul, to transform his yetzer hara, to become part of the godly reality, to become part of the godly image, to become part of the godly objective. Like the Mishnah says, that one has to establish this love and drive to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, not only from the perspective of his nefesh alikis, what else does it love? It only loves HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's a chelik of the kami mal mamash, it's part of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But even from the perspective of the Yetzer Hara, that's what it says in a plural expression, not b'chol lipcha, b'chol levavcha. The Yetzer Hara should also be consumed and subsumed into this godly reality with appreciation. So there's an objective, there's a goal. So in this context, the Yinuk is telling us this Nahira, which is Adlik al Reisha, which is the Shechinta, it needs to enter into Mishcha, it needs to enter into the concept of oil, which is the Shemen Mishchas Kodesh, which is the holy oil of anointment. And that is Chochmah, which, remember, the Chacham Das being the Kodesh Kadashim, the holy shrine of every single Eilam. And in this case, like Mashkasa B'Zayar, V'inun Uvdin Tovin, these are the good deeds, which are the Taryag, Mitzvahs HaTeirah, with mitzvahs, these are the 613 mitzvahs, Hanim Shachis Mechachmasa Yizbarich, which come from Hashem's Chachma. So the Taryag mitzvahs are called the Shem Mishchas Kodesh, it's called the holy oil of anointment. And to understand the Chachmasi is Baruch, the mitzvahs associated with Hashem's Chachma, even though mitzvahs you see more the Ratzin, but you got to see the end, the very end of last class. Because in the end of the day, Hu Uritzayne v'Chachmasi Echad, unlike the way it is but in the human condition, that it's separate, there's the person, his wisdom, his knowledge, his desires, it's all separate entities come together. Murkavim, they come together, but HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it's all essentially one. So the Uvdin Tov in these mitzvahs, these Torah, which is Taryag mitzvahs, which including learning Torah, this comes from the Chachmaseit of the Chachma of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and therefore it's called the Shem Mishchas Kodesh. It says a number of places. Excuse me. So it says it does say in a number of places. What's the connection of Chochma to Shem? Not many places. Torah, the Chochma of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is compared to the Shemen. We know that many places, not only in Sifrei Chassidus. Shemen HaTeiv al Hareish Yered Alazokin Skan Aaron. It's explained many mefarshim that pasuk in Tehillim, but generally, shemen, oil, is usually, it has a number of different characters that no other substance has. In one hand, it stands on top of everything. Wherever you put it with any other liquid, it stands on top of it. On the other hand, it's mefafeya b'chol davar. It penetrates everything. Also, in this case, oil. It's there to be used for a higher purpose. In other words, it serves for a higher purpose. For example, a fire to burn on it. Fire cannot maintain a long time of it can't hold, and it can burn nicely for a long time only through oil, because oil establishes itself a basis for the burning of the fire, and it consumes slowly into the fire. Similarly, Chochmas shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu, as Alter Rebbe writes a number of times about the midah of Chochma. Just going to say this quickly. If you see throughout the Tanya, the Alter Rebbe writes in the very beginning of Perek Gimel, and as he says, Chochma is koyach ma. The word Chochma is a koyach ma. It's not an entity of itself, even though it's the initiation of the appreciation and understanding of any single manner. Wisdom, only then understanding, and only then knowledge. But nonetheless, it's a koyach ma, which is what? It's bittul. It stands there to introduce something higher and to bring something higher into the system. And namely in Perek Yud Ches, the Alter Rebbe says the koyach ma is just a conduit to something higher. It's not a metzias on its own. So again, in the word chochma itself, koyach ma, like Moshe Rabbeinu said, benachnu ma. What are we? It's not something which is, it's rather something which is not, but not in a way that it's a keli, it's a container, and a for something higher. For that matter, the famous expression in Perek Lamed Hey, v'kasher shamaiti mimeri, says the Alter Rebbe, referring to his Mizit Shemagid, that the chochma of Hatzilus is the way that Ein Sof comes into Hatzilus, because chochma is the keli, because chochma is about bittul, chochma is about self-knowledge. In other words, it's not there as an expanded mitzius, like bina, understanding expansively. It's the nukud of chochma. Again, there's so much, hundreds of pages written about the mid of chochma in comparison to bina, the other cognitive faculties. But the nukud is chochma's koyach is just something which serves for its batul. It stands in self nullification for something higher. That's why the shemen is similar to that, because it's there to draw the fire, allow the fire to burn on it. In this case, the Ein Sof comes precisely through Chochma, because Chochma stands with a complete bittul. So generally, there's a number of places why Chochma is compared to the Shemen. Mishchas Kodesh, also Chochma is the highest. It's the highest of all spheres, similar to the oil, which stands on high. Conversely, Mifafeya b'chol davar. This is the point of Chochma, that you enter into the world of Bina. Again, those who learn Chassidus or generally have the knowledge, Chacham Bina Das, and eventually its impact on Midas, on the Midas of the person. So it's always important in expression in Kabbalah and Chassidus, Nekuda Behechala, to always maintain the Nekuda, the emes of the matter, even though you develop the subsequent expressions of starting from the cognitive faculties, but then eventually even you emote or you get involved emotionally in the matter. It's very important always to maintain the nukud of emes, the nukud of chochma throughout. And that's the idea of shemen, which is also, besides the fact that it's beyond, it stands over everything, it's also mefafeya b'chol davar, it penetrates everything, which this is again the nature of oil, and this is the comparison of chochma to shemen, even though it's mentioned a number of times other comparisons. But this is what the Nuka is telling us, that it needs the chochma, needs the shemen mishchas kodesh, it needs that kodesh hakadoshim to enter, to have the objective, and to carry forth the objective of the neshama in the guf, and with its mandate in elam hazeh. And that's what he says, Kidei la'echiz eir hashchina b'psila, in order that the eir hashchina should connect to the wick, which is the nefesh hachayunish b'guf, which is the animal soul, which is, again, nefesh habahamis is tantamount to nefesh hachayunis, which is hanikreis psila, which is called the wick. This is the objective of the neshama, that it should touch base or and have an impact on the wick, that the wick should be consumed in the Eir Eliki, in the godly fire. The only way that could happen The only way that it could be successful with that happening is only when there is chokhmah, the chokhmah which is associated with chokhmah of Torah, which is generally taryag mitzvah Torah. It means simply in practical terms the scrupulousness in keeping Hashem's mitzvahs, and scrupulousness staying away from Hashem's leises. Hashem, this is what Hashem says not to do. This scrupulousness in shkvis itim la Torah, and to learn Torah on a constant basis, based each one to his own, based on his mentor will tell him how much Torah he has to learn based on his schedule, and he keeps to it. And when he sits down and learns, it's learning Torah only. And the same thing when it comes to davening, it's focusing on a menschliche, healthy davening. When you do a lot of that, what happens is the eir of the Shechina has an impact, as a very successful impact on the psila, on the wick, on the nefesh chiyunis, on the animal soul, because this is the objective in the end of the day. The neshama had much more love and fear of HaKadosh Baruch Hu before it came down to this world. The objective of the neshama is to sublimate the nefesh mahamis, the animal soul. But this can become very tricky, because someone would say, okay, so just get the fire on and get the psila completely burnt into the fire, as one would light a fire without oil. Try to light a fire without oil. Certainly you've got the psila, which is the wick, completely consumed, but it takes a few seconds. That is called negating the psila. When you burn up the psila, when you burn up the wick, it's not that the psila, the wick, was appreciated the fire. It was just consumed into the fire and burnt away. And Hashem does not want the consumption of the nefesh bahamis, of the animal soul, and ultimately it's a horror, into the godly fire in that fashion, because then you're just negating the nefesh bahamis. And for the negating the nefesh bahamis, Nefesh Elokis never had to come down into Ilam Hazeh, for that matter, because it didn't. If you're not going to have an actual impact of conviction to the nefesh bahamis, to the animal soul, that it should start on its own appreciating the godly reality. And as the pasuk says, "V'ahavtas Hashem," that it should have true love, a true passion to Elokus. Just by burning it up at once, you didn't fulfill your mandate, because in the end of the day, it would have been probably better if you never started to begin with. But if the objective of Nefesh Elokis, it should gradually have an impact on the psila, on the wick, meaning to say the psila, the wick, should gradually burn up, and it does. Try to have a wick, the same wick which allows the fire to carry over for 3-4 hours, and it's only because of the oil, naturally, because it in its own would have been burnt up in seconds, as we all know it. But nonetheless, you see, after the fire extinguishes, you will see that the wick was shortened, did shrink, because part of it was consumed to the fire, but consumed not negating the wick, that allowing it just to burn up. The point is that it appreciates, so to say, it burns into the fire slowly. Slowly in this case means that it in the message over here, that the nefesh bahamis appreciates the Eid Eliki. It burns in slowly, meaning to say that it goes step by step, very slowly, but it based on its own pace, that it's able to appreciate the godly reality, have a drive to the godly reality, godly reality, to have a passion to the godly reality, till to have a full-fledged booming love to the godly reality. V'ahavta. V'ahavta doesn't mean just get rid of it. No, v'ahavta means to establish a ava, a love to Hashem. And therefore, what the Yanuka is telling you, you want to accomplish that? You want to accomplish your mandate, your mission alayot, where Hashem sent you. For this, that Hashem sent you to elevate, to refine, to sublimate, not only, for that matter, all matters of Ilam Hazeh. You're the lot which was given to you to elevate and refine, but starting from your own nefesh bahamis. That's the primary mandate of the Yid. And for which the neshama came down to this world, to elevate his own, to sublimate his own nefesh bahamis. You want to be successful with that? Don't think you can do it without a perfect, without being the Shulchan Aruch Yid. You can't. You need to have that oil, and the oil is the Chochma of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which a Raisa v'Kutshabrichu Kol Echad, a Raisa which a Chochma Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu, with HaKadosh Baruch Hu is one, which is referring again, encapsulates the entire Chochma. In other words, the Chochma is the whole package of Taryag mitzvahs. when you will be the Shulchan Aruch Yid and you'll do what you have to do, then, in other words, you'll have the oil, that beautiful oil, that Shem Mishchas Kodesh, in between the fire and the wick, then the fire will have a perfect impact on the wick. And this is the message, again, in this context of the Yenuka, which the Alter Rebbe says, a l'teisvus beer, which he brings this home, brings the message home, which is the culmination of Nun Aleph, the chapter 51, 52, 53, and he says you need the shemen in order to be successful with that psila. As he says over here, he continues, just like when it comes to a physical fire, a physical candle, the fire shines. It is through the when I say candle, usually we think about candle wax. Sometimes this which holds the fire, the way the fire is able to burn is through the consumption of the wick into the fire, which is transformed to fire. It's not that, as we mentioned before, when you measure that same wick, despite it allowed the fire to contain itself, in other words, to burn for a few hours, as opposed to just burning up with when you did not have the oil, nonetheless, the part of the wick is always consumed into the fire, but a slow and careful consumption. So physically, in order that the air should meir, it shines through the consumption of the wick. So too the divine presence dwells on the godly soul through the consumption of the animal soul, through the subsumption of the animal soul into the godly reality, and its transformation, not negation, but transformation from darkness to light, from bitterness to sweetness. Now we know there are differences between tzaddikim and beinanim. Tzaddikim had that perfect ava in their entire system, that it was a complete transformation, as we learned in the beginning, in the first chapters of the Tanya. As we remember, the Alter Rebbe classified what the tzaddik is and what the beinani is, which is in Pedic, in the first chapters up till Pedic Yudal. It goes on later, even in Pedic Yudalit as well. But generally, the original Prakim of Tanya, the Alter Rebbe says that tzaddik has transformed all of himself to a lakus. Not only the garments, which is thought, speech, and action. Again, you have to appreciate it. You have to learn it. I would just add, it's a click away. You can see it. They're there. These chapters of the first chapters of Tanya, and so there's a total transformation, not only of his garments, thought, speech, and action, but also of the inner workings, his intellect, his emotions. All are completely transformed to lakus. The beinani did not transform his animal soul. The inner workings of the animal soul, there's always signals, could be negative signals, which shoot up to his action, to his thought, and to his speech. Action, speech, and thought. And he has to control them, and he has to contain them. So where was that transformation? Only in his garments, as opposed to the tzaddik. The entire inner workings of the tzaddik were transformed to God. So there, here the Alter Rebbe says it again, repeats this in brief. The tzaddikim had the entire transformation of the animal soul, or at least or through the subsumption of the levushim, of the garments, which is machshava dibur u'maisa, thought, speech, and action, and its transformation from the darkness of the klipis, in other words, world of impurity, the transformation to the godly light and the infinite light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, blessed be He, which is invested and united, so to say, became one with the thought, speech, and action of the fulfilling of the 613 mitzvahs by a beinani, which we know again, the beinani is someone who's a perfect Shulchan Aruch Yid, but nonetheless he didn't transform the inwardness or the inner workings of the Nefesh Bahamis. By him it's more than machshava dibur u'maisa, even though, again, Alter Rebbe makes it very clear in the 4th chapter of Tanya, that when we speak about Torah mitzvahs, it's all about machshava dibur u'maisa, because prior to the machshava dibur u'maisa, it's all about the levushim. The Torah mitzvahs, look at any single mitzvah, you'll see its connection to the garments of the neshama. the difference of Perek Gimel and Perek Dalet, as we spoke about it then. So the Beinoni has a complete, he's Sholem in Taryag Mitzvah Torah, but his Taryag Mitzvah Torah has an impact on him. In other words, the impact of Taryag Mitzvah Torah is on his alignment with the Lukus, with Hashem, is in Machshava Dibra Ma'aseh, in his thought, speech, and action, as opposed to the Tzaddik, which has transformed everything. Again, you can see it there in the first chapters of Tanya. So but nonetheless, there's also some type of transformation. So not in its entirety, but nonetheless, in the Shalosh Leishul Vushim, Machshav Dir Ma'aseh, the Nefesh Bahamis has no chance with the Beinoni, because his entire thought, speech, and action is invested in the thought, speech, and action of Elokus, godliness, Hashem's Torah, and Hashem's mitzvahs. So there you also have that transformation, similar to the subsumption of the wick into the fire, into the fire. In this case, the transformation of that part of the Nefesh Bahamis into the Eireliki, into the godly fire, which is the Shechinta, the Shari al Reisha, the Adlik al Reisha. Because through the transformation of Nefesh Bahamis, which comes from Klipas Nega Mashech Hashech al Nehera, from darkness to light, Nasa B'chinas Halo Asman Laham Shechei Rashchinu B'chinas Gilei and Tzobaruch Al Nefesh Likisha B'mechet Shebereishei, and that causes this is kind of a catch-22, if you will. That the Rebbe says that itself establishes an additional draw of the Shechina over the Nefesh Likis itself. So you need the entire system, but when you succeed with a system that the Nefesh Bahamis is transformed, that draws more godly energy on the Nefesh Likis itself. And he uses the Lashon Halas Man, which we spoke about this as well many times. It's a terminology used in Kabbalah. Man is the word, there's man and mad. Man is the Mayin Nukvin, and Mad is Mayin Duchrin, the feminine waters and masculine waters, which is the feminine calling would be the feminine waters. Similar to the relationship of the masculine and the feminine, there's the calling, there is the indication of the coming from the feminine towards the masculine, calling for the masculine. And in terms of Kabbalah, this is a metaphor for the Hisarusa de Lisata, the arousal of below, generally of Am Yisrael. In the grander picture, Hashem called the Ish, Am Yisrael called the Isha, Hashem called the masculine, and we are called the feminine, the Isha, the woman. And therefore, in our relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we always know that Hashem many times, or most of the times, from the day namely He gave the Torah, Hisarusa de La'ela, Hisarusa de Lisata Tali Milsa. The arousal of above comes in conjunction with, or consequent to, the arousal of below. Because the arousal of below is which elicits the arousal of on high, similar to the way it is in Nukva and Duchra, in the feminine and the masculine. So Alter Rebbe says here in this context as well, when there is the halah, the transformation of the Nefesh Bahamis, that would be the Mayin Nukvin, the calling from below, which is again the success of this which is below, which is the Nefesh Bahamis. Its transformation. Imagine an animal soul be completely transformed, or by the Beinoni at least its thought, speech, and action completely transformed to a Lakus. This is a great arousal, which is definitely a below arousal because it's coming from the Nefesh Bahamis, to draw even more of the revelation of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, even into the Nefesh Likis, even into the godly soul itself. And this becomes again the very final words of the Tanya, that the Laham Shechei Rashchina, that becomes the Halas Man, to draw the light of the Shechina, which is the revelation of the infinite light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Nefesh Likis Shebemeichin Shebereishei, on the godly soul, which is in the Meichin Shebereishei, in the brain within his head. Which that's the premier domain of the Nefesh Likis. If you remember, the beginning of Perek Tes, where Alter Rebbe says, where is the station of the Nefesh Likis? He says, namely in the brain. We spoke about it then. It's a click away. The connection of the godly soul with the brain, because the Nefesh Likis is essentially intellectual. It does things based on seichel, not just based on drive and passion, lust and covet. It's something. Everything Nefesh Likis does is definitely appreciated intellectually. the Kayach of the Nefesh Elikis is to draw even with this which is beyond intellect, into the system. But primarily, where's the primary state, the primary domain of the Nefesh Elikis? It's in the Meichin. So in that very Meichin which we spoke about, that's where the Nefesh Elikis is. So this draws more when you have the Tzrus L'Sata, in other words, the success with the sublimation and the transformation of the Nefesh Bahamis. So that causes additional Gilui revelation of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the infinite light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, blessed be He, on the Nefesh Elikis, which is a Meichad Shebereish. V'zeh Yuvan, and this understood Heitiv, thoroughly Mashkos Vashke Hashem Lekecha Eish Eich Lahu, K'mish Bar B'makam Acher, and with this becomes the final words of the Tanya, that this is with this understood, how the Pasuk says about Hashem, that Hashem, your God, is a burning fire, a consuming fire. K'mish Bar B'makam Acher, like it's explained elsewhere, so there's a simple meaning. Then remember that Hashem, Elokus, is fire. Elokus is fiery energy. It's again explained on so many different levels, but could it be appreciated on a very simple elemental level? But based on this pasuk fits in so beautifully that you're dealing with that Eir Eliki which needs to consume, and it's there to consume the Nefesh Bahamis primarily. And that's the point of the Eish Hashem Elikecha. It has to be an Eish Eichlo, a consuming fire. So you have the Eir Eliki, which is the Shechina, and you have the Psila, which is again the Nefesh Bahamis, which is the primary reason why the Yid came down into the world, like the Alter Rebbe makes it clear in the chapters of in the Lamids, in that the Neshama on its own Eino Tzricha Tikun. I believe it's Lamid Zayin. The Neshama itself does not need a Tikun on its own. And the only reason the Neshama came is to elevate the Nefesh HaChayunis. But again, this could be tricky, but it's not again in just a fire to burn it out, and then you didn't accomplish anything, but it has to be an Eish Eichlahu, a consuming fire. And it's consuming fire, a successful consuming fire, is the way the Alter Rebbe illustrates it over here, that it's Nefesh Bahami slowly but surely allowing the Eir Eliki to penetrate and ultimately to transform the Nefesh Bahamis in its different levels, the Tzaddik and the Beinani, but that needs the Shemen Mishchas Kodesh, that needs that holy oil of anointment, which is again the Taryag Mitzvah Torah, and that itself draws an additional light over the Nefesh Elikis. Nishlam Chelik Rishon Be'ezus Hashem Yisborach, which Alter Rebbe concluded such an important chapter, in other words, an important segment which would make an impact on all of history, and did make an impact since this holy Sefer Tanya, and to hundreds and hundreds of thousands of Yidden throughout, and continues to make to have that impact, and more so, it's the reason, as we spoke a number of times, that Pnimis HaTorah, it's not only just to bring the Yid closer to Hashem, but ultimately a preparation to Yemais HaMashiach, which we're entering Mamish B'Korev, which ultimately is ultimately the idea of Yemais HaMashiach. There's that perfect alignment of the Yid with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the perfect alignment with the world with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. As the Alter Rebbe explains in these very chapters, Lamed Vav, Lamed Zayin, Lamed Ches, that it's inseparable, the Avodah of the Yid and the ultimate objective of Yemei HaMashiach, when the whole world will be full Deus Hashem, with the knowledge of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Kamayim Liyam Mechasim, like water covers the ocean bed, the ocean floor, which is the ultimate purpose of everything, that the entire world, the entire world will be saturated with the message of the oneness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So the message of Tanya, Pnimis HaTorah in general, is again a message which is very much aligned and connected to and leads and brings the Yemais HaMashiach, which we're all anticipating. And again, as we elaborate on this very latter concept, and Be'ez Hashem, we will continue in hopefully the beginning of the next segment, Sharich V'Emunas, like we mentioned, hopefully way into Yemais HaMashiach. Be'ez Hashem, as Mashiach comes now, Mamash. Have a wonderful evening.